Hey everyone, I'm Jennifer Woods and welcome to my channel. This week I will be wrapping up my discussion of the Dollenganger series with Seeds of Yesterday. There is a mini-series that followed it called Flowers in the Attic, The Origin. It's based on the Garden of Shadows book. I will discuss that eventually, but since it's a mini-series, there's quite a lot to it. Plus, it's been a while since I've read that book, so I want to refresh my memory before I discuss that. So I'm going to put that off for a little bit. I do hope to get to Heaven, Dark Angel, the other movies and books in the Castile series soon as well. But yes, this week will be my wrap-up of the Dollenganger series for now. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do so that you won't miss any of my latest updates. So let's begin with Seeds of Yesterday. This is the first time I've noticed the warning at the beginning of the movie that says, this might not be appropriate for young viewers. It probably was at the beginning of all of the other film adaptations, but it kind of amused me to suddenly notice it now. Yeah, no Sherlock. So the movie begins with a voiceover, as these movies often do. Kathy is rambling on about motherhood. Our mothers teach us what kind of women to become, or, in Kathy's case, what kind of mothers not to become. She kind of tacks that on at the end, even though it seems to be the whole point of this little speech of hers. Like in the book, the story opens with Kathy and Chris returning to Foxworth Hall because apparently they haven't been tortured enough in this lifetime. They've come to celebrate Bart's 25th birthday and the reading of the late Corinne's will. In the book, If There Be Thorns, we find out at the end that Corinne left all her money to her 3 grandchildren, including the adopted granddaughter who only came into the family a few months before Corinne was senselessly killed in a fire that was started by her malevolent butler husband. In Seeds of Yesterday, though, it seems only Bart will be inheriting. He's probably the only one of the 3 who really cares. I like how, in the movie, we see ghosts of the 4 Dollenganger children and their mother walking up to the front door of Foxworth Hall all those years ago, shortly after Daddy died. So the first big change the movie makes is that it eliminates one of the main characters in this 4th book. Joel Foxworth, the uncle of Kathy and Chris, and the younger brother of Corinne's 2 older brothers, was assumed dead in an avalanche shortly before Corinne met and fell in love with her father's younger half-brother, Chris Garland Foxworth Sr. However, Joel greets Kathy and Chris at the resurrected Foxworth Hall, giving them this outrageous story of having escaped the avalanche with his life after being rescued by kindly monks. He spent the next several decades playing the piano, painting murals, basically doing all the things that would make Father Malcolm roll over in his grave. Joel claims that some American journalist had visited the monastery for a story he was writing, and just so happened to know who this random millionaire from Virginia named Malcolm Foxworth was, because everybody in the whole universe knows who Malcolm is. And that got Joel and this journalist to talking. Joel found out his parents were dead and eventually decided to return to his hometown to check up on the younger sister he hadn't seen for a good 60 years by this point. Upon his return, he finds out that his sister died in a barn fire. Betty didn't see that plot twist coming. And her grandson, his great-nephew, was all set to inherit her millions on his 25th birthday. Bart and Joel have become the best of friends for some reason, despite the fact that Joel is a closer heir to Malcolm and Corinne and could potentially come between Bart and the money he desires more than anything. Joel was such a sweetheart in the book Garden of Shadows, which was ghostwritten by Andrew Niederman after V.C. Andrews' death in 1986, and certainly I would think his time in a monastery, living the life of a poor artist, would have made him a more humble and caring individual. Certainly he was never like his father Malcolm, not even during his first 19 years. Yet in Seeds of Yesterday, he is revealed to basically be yet another John Amos who has ingratiated himself into the life and mind of the impressionable Bart. I honestly think he was probably an imposter, someone pretending to be a Foxworth heir, since Joel's body was never found. But in the movie, they leave him out entirely. And this is problematic in my opinion, because it's harder to have compassion for Bart if there's not another evil person lurking nearby to take the fall for all of the bad things that start happening in Foxworth Hall once the grown-up attic mice have returned to the site of their childhood trauma. But we'll get back to those bad things in a few minutes. Now we get a shot of Bart's naked chest as he's walking around with a towel wrapped around his waist. I feel pretty confident the naked chest shot is an important plot point that can be found on Freytag's triangle. For those unfamiliar, Freytag's triangle or pyramid is the 5 components of a storyline. They include exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. The naked chest shot is in there somewhere. So Bart is almost 15 years older, but he's still pretending he's Malcolm, carrying around his great-grandfather's journal, talking like some fundamentalist, and obsessing over stray dust particles in his home sweet mansion. He loves his mother, especially when she wears Howlet red. His stepfather Chris, on the other hand, is another story. Chris is the executor of Corinne Foxworth's estate, if I understood correctly. I don't know about all these legal terms. But basically, Bart can't wait until the day he no longer has to answer to the man he despises most for sinning with his beloved mother. So far, this feels like some pompous movie from the late 90s, early 2000s, starring Leonardo DiCaprio or Joaquin Phoenix. "This vexes me," said Bart. "I'm terribly vexed." Kathy and Chris are concerned about Bart because he seems to have this weird preoccupation with modeling himself after the late Foxworth patriarch he never met, but not so concerned that it distracts them from their number one priority, getting it on like Marvin Gaye in their mother's resurrected swan bed. Next, Brother Jory arrives with his wife Melody. Melody is pregnant with twins, much to Kathy's delight, but that means Mel won't be able to dance the role of Delilah at Bart's upcoming party. This vexes Bart. He's terribly vexed. Now Bart and his mother are engaging in their favorite mother-son bonding activity, spying on Kathy's older son as he slow dances with his wife. Bart is annoyed with the absolute harlotry going on under his roof. In the next scene, baby sister Cindy arrives. In the book, she's about 16. In the movie, I'm not sure how old she's supposed to be, but I'm thinking around 18. At least I hope so, considering events that are about to transpire in the not-so-distant future. When Cindy arrives, Bart and Jory are playing tennis because they just so happen to have a tennis court on their property for no other reason than so Bart can walk around in white polo shirts, looking like Mark Harmon as Ted Bundy. Cindy's arrival vexes Bart. He's never cared for her, not since she was about 4 or 5 and he tried to drown her in a kiddie pool in the backyard. Ultimately, her sudden appearance on scene leads to a fight between Bart and his uncle Chris. Bart later apologizes to Cindy, quite uncharacteristically and suspiciously, I might add. Cindy offers to dance the role of Delilah opposite Jory, who will dance the role of Samson at Bart's birthday bash. Some people might think siblings dancing the roles of lovers would be awkward, but remember, awkward is relative here. No pun intended. A little later, Cindy overhears Bart on a phone call, talking insurance in the event something unforeseen should happen at his upcoming party. I wonder if something unforeseen is going to happen at the party. I suppose technically it couldn't be called unforeseen because we foresaw it, now didn't we? Cindy wants to wear a trashy red dress to the party. She models it for her family beforehand, and Bart throws a conniption fit. He makes some typical 90s jab about her being adopted. Back in the 90s, that was the ultimate insult. So glad we've advanced as a society. But this 2015 movie sure did get the tone of the time right. I think the movie is supposed to take place in the 90s, or maybe the early 2000s. Maybe that's why it feels like some pompous movie from that era. In the book, he spanks her as a punishment for her choice in clothing. In the movie, he just throws a tantrum, and Cindy changes to a blue dress. Apparently, Bart has never heard the oldies classic that devils wear blue dresses. If he had, he'd probably make her change out of that outfit as well. As Kathy is walking past party guests, she overhears someone mention that she, Kathy, is the daughter who exposed Corinne Foxworth as a money-hungry child killer years earlier at the Christmas party that will live on in infamy. This doesn't appear to be the way Kathy likes to be remembered now that she's in her 50s. In her 20s, I'm sure she aimed to leave that kind of lasting impression. There's no mention of the fire that followed the revelation. Apparently the grandmother and Bart Sr. burning to death in the blaze that destroyed the legendary Foxworth Hall wasn't as newsworthy as the preceding bit of high society gossip. Bart and Kathy share a touching mother-son moment, and then Kathy sees Cindy dancing provocatively nearby. Her blue dress hasn't seemed to put a damper on her fun. Kathy manages to distract Bart by sending him to fetch her a drink, and so a disaster is averted. Now it's time for the night's performance, starring Bart's big brother Jory and their adopted sister Cindy. This might seem like a mean-spirited jab at Cindy, but I will remind you, this was supposed to take place in the 90s. At least it did in the book. And in the 90s, you always qualified an adopted sibling over a biological one. That's just how it worked. During the performance, Bart flirts with Melody, and surprise, surprise, a column on stage crashes down on Jory and nearly kills him. In the book, apparently the sand that filled the column was wet so that it would land like concrete. It was supposed to be dry. So the question in the book is, who wet the sand? Melody freaks out. She's convinced her husband is going to die, just like his father did before he was born. Kathy is like, F you, Mel, for being a spineless loser. And sure enough, Jory pulls through, only he's paralyzed, which means so long dancing career. There's a scene where Bart reads up on his brother's injury in the paper while sipping his morning coffee, walking around in an open robe. More bare chest. These writers really care about Freytag's triangle. They're hitting all those plot points. Kathy tries to drag Melody out of bed to visit her gravely injured husband, but Melody is like, I just want to lie here and sulk like an a-hole. Kathy is like, sucks to be you. I lost my husband when I was pregnant with Jory, and yet somehow I managed to go on. Kathy, you hated Julian. You are glad to see him dead. Not the same. Cindy tells her parents that she's concerned about Bart because she overheard a phone call where he was talking party insurance before the ill-fated performance at Brother Bart's party. The parents confront their younger son, and he's like, sure, blame the kid you always hated most. Did it ever occur to you that some rival dancer might have crashed the party? Kathy and Chris give this flying pig theory its day in court before deciding, yeah, that makes sense, but Kathy still has her doubts. Bart, in the meantime, is comforting Melody because she's the forgotten one, as everyone is doting on and tending to his brother. Later, Bart has a heart-to-heart talk with his brother at the hospital. Jory is touched that his younger brother has grown into a halfway decent human. Bart is like, nah, I'm just trying to lift your spirits and get you out of this hospital so that we can go read that family will. Bart continues to cater to Melody, and then they kiss and do the embrace of eternal hellfire. Meanwhile, Jory is concerned he won't be much of a father since he can't even wipe his own, let alone a baby's. Bart has an elevator installed so that Jory won't be trapped on the first floor. How sweet of him. I'm trying to figure out what his end goal is with this. Clearly he must have an ulterior motive, or is he just trying to make everyone think he really is a caring guy? The will is finally read. It's not a V.C. Andrews novel without an annoying codicil that is added at the last minute. Apparently Bart won't be inheriting his fortune just yet, not until he's 35. He'll have to settle for a mere pittance of $500,000 a year in the meantime. That wasn't what he was initially told, and now Bart will have to answer to Chris for another 10 more years. Somehow he screwed him over yet again. Also, it is stated in the will that if Bart is ever to be institutionalized, the money will all go to his stepfather. That's awfully specific. If I were Bart, I'd be treading carefully around Uncle Chris. Kathy spots Bart and Melody going for a nice little walk outside at a later date, and she doesn't like the look of this. Melody should be with her husband, not her husband's brother. Just the very fact that Bart and Melody are going for a walk together when Jory no longer has use of his lower limbs strikes me as awfully passive-aggressive of them. Jory cries to his mother. He doesn't know about the affair. He just feels so useless lying in bed all the time. At some point, he takes up painting, as all characters do in these novels when they're locked up, or paralyzed, or trapped in a monastery with saintly monks. It's never anyone's first choice of a pastime. It's always a, what the heck else am I going to do kind of activity. Oh look, I'm the next Picasso. Kind of like how Kathy had nothing better to do than practice some pirouettes in a dusty attic, and suddenly she's the next coming of Pavlova. Or she hurts her knee and can't dance anymore, so she decides to shame the entire family by writing the story of their lives. Of course it will become a bestseller. Kathy walks in on Bart and Melody, getting it on like Marvin Gaye, and she's embarrassed and horrified. Bart's like, ever heard of knocking first, mother? The blasé way he says this indicates to me this is not the first time she's caught him in such a compromising situation. Clearly, at this point in his life, such an occurrence is so common that it has been reduced to a joke at the dinner table. But why would you expect a modicum of personal space and privacy in a family where all of the members are basically doing each other? Bart tells Kathy she has no right to judge him because her sins are so much worse than his. This is not a contest, Bart, and I don't care what anyone says. Sleeping with your paraplegic brother's pregnant wife is a pretty low bar. Kathy tries to cheer Jory up by telling him that she's going to arrange a nice little dinner date for him and his wife later on that evening. Stupid Kathy seems to have forgotten to clear this with Melody first, because it appears Melody and Bart already have plans. Kathy also was stupid enough to set up the dinner table next to the pool so that Jory can roll right into the water when he realizes his wife is not coming after all. Lucky for him, or, unluckily, depending on your perspective, Chris sees him in his wheelchair at the bottom of the pool and saves the day. Nothing gets Kathy fired up quite like the near death of her favorite son, and she's ready to let Melody have it. Melody calls Kathy up, and Kathy is like, "That's my name, so nice to meet you." So Melody reconciles with Jory, but I don't think this little really means it. What do you want to bet she's back to crying and sniveling in no time? Then she'll go and jump into bed with Bart again so that they can get it on some more, making both Marvin Gaye and T-Rex proud. So now everyone in Foxworth Hall is preparing for a Christmas celebration. In the book, Bart plans to throw a Christmas party and sends out the invites, only for no one to show up. It is later discovered by Kathy, while she's poking around in other people's business, that the invitations were never mailed by Uncle Joel like he'd promised to do. But since Uncle Joel is not in the movie, that whole plotline got axed. Anyway, Jory and Melody are acting all lovey-dovey, and Kathy gets a warm and tingly feeling watching them. Not so fast. Melody comes crawling back to Bart's quarters, begging for a release. He's not so keen on being anyone's sloppy seconds, though, so he puts her in her place. Now we meet Cindy's boyfriend, Lance. He comes to Foxworth Hall for dinner one night and kisses up to Bart, calling him Mr. Foxworth. Please, Mr. Foxworth is their dead, evil great-grandfather. Call him Bart, Cindy says. Cindy and Lance eventually excuse themselves and take dessert in another room. They leave the door ajar because Cindy clearly wants an audience. Bart proves he's Olivia Foxworth's great-grandson when he beats Lance to within an inch of his life. Cindy whines to her parents, telling tales out of school about Brother Bart and how unfair he's being. Kathy sides with Bart. Cindy needs to learn to keep it in her pants. Of course, Chris looks at the situation differently. Daddy's little girl can do no wrong. Bart needs to check himself. Well, that was a nice little segs talk with a rents. Bart is prepping himself for the big apology by stabbing himself in the arm with a tiny sword. Dear God, give him strength. He apologizes to Cindy for being a bit firm with her lover boy. Sounds like this beating cost him money out of his own pockets, and that's what he's probably really sorry about. He tells her that she's his little sister and he feels protective of her. Cindy's so touched by his brotherly words that she almost jumps his bones right then and there, but he's like, can't I pretend to be a good big brother for once without it escalating to this? Chris on a cracker! Speak of the devil, here's Chris now, coming into the kitchen to find out why Cindy left in a huff and what Bart is all worked up about. He assumes this is something Bart needs to sort out with his younger sibling. He's tired of these little tantrums that flare up every time Cindy tries to get in Barty's pants and Barty pushes her away. Melody feels trapped. She already hates her unborn babies. It's Jory's fault. He was the one who wanted to be a father. Melody wishes they would just die already. Now it's Christmas Day, and the family is opening presents. Bart bought Cindy her very own Discman. Just what she always wanted. He's so clearly hot for her bod. Jory gives Bart a homemade present from the heart, an artistic rendering of Foxworth Hall. I remember when Kathy took one look at her son's beautiful painting in the book. She was like, ugh, can't you draw something happy? Oh, Kathy, you were such a mom. In the movie, Bart and Cindy take a similar view of their older brother's loving attention to detail. Ugh, Foxworth Hall. Chris gives a toast to his family. He hopes that one day his younger son and daughter will find love just like his older son has. Just hopefully not with each other. Right, Chris? Bart isn't so touched by his words. He takes this as a perfect opportunity to, on the occasion, by announcing his affair with Melody. The rest of the family thinks he's a real for spoiling the mood. Melody's water chooses this moment to break. So she has the babies, a boy and a girl twin. Wow, that's like a totally unexpected plot twist. In the book and movie, they are named Deirdre and Darren. The previous generation took all the good C names, so it's time to move on to the next letter in the alphabet, says Book Jory. Melody is convinced Jory will be a bad father. What good will he be to her kids without the use of his legs? Oh, Mel, stop being such a judgmental little, says Kathy. Clearly we have the money to get you loads of hired help. After a failed attempt at a Rocky training montage where Jory does a couple arm stretches in the home gym, he confronts Bart and lets his brother know what he thinks of him for getting a little side action with his wife while he was having fantasies of being unalive in another room. Bart, true to form, blames Melody for being such a spineless wimp and needing a little pick-me-up to brightly color her lonely days. A little later, Jory finds a note from Melody, and just like that, we won't be seeing her around anymore. Imagine abandoning your own flesh and blood. I've never seen anyone do something so horrible before, not in a V.C. Andrews novel. It's surprising more isn't made of this betrayal. We just move on to Cindy running off to some bar. I'm pretty sure she's not old enough to be doing that. Maybe that's why Bart is so concerned and decides to follow after her. He kind of watches from a distance and waits until she's on her way home, walking alone in the woods like some girl who's asking for trouble, before he decides to make his move. Ah! Oh, it's just you, Bart, my mentally unstable brother who secretly wants to jump my bones. After all, I'm only adopted. What are you doing here, may I ask? They end up doing the Malcolm Foxworth in some dirty forest leaves. If you aren't sure what the Malcolm Foxworth is, it's this little horizontal dance that was all the rage in the first half of the 80s. So now Cindy has come away with a mistaken impression that her brother's in love with her. Where would she get a crazy idea like that? He finds her waiting for him in his room, in her underwear. She reveals that she knows the truth about their parents, but this is different. She's only Bart's adopted sister. See? I knew that qualifier would become important later on. Bart coldly rejects her, and she leaves Foxworth Hall shortly after, disillusioned and absolutely gutted. Kathy and Chris suspect her decision to find her own path in life has something to do with their crazy second son, Bart. So Chris starts talking about finding a new place to live. I'm sorry, I thought they were intending to live in Foxworth Hall forever. Isn't it like the Hotel California? You could try to walk out that door if you'd like, but good luck to you. Oh, look, Jory can swim. Must be thanks to that Rocky training montage from earlier. They have a nanny named Tony who looks after the new twins. Bart decides he will flirt with her. Kathy isn't so sure about Bart and Tony, but what can she do about it? He decides he needs to test Tony's love for him by telling her that his grandmother was a real psycho who spent time in a mental institution, and he's one slip-up away from being sent to one too. He accuses her of being a gold digger, even though she insists that she's not, and would you look at that, they're broken up now. In the book, Jory and Tony end up getting together and will later announce to Kathy that they're about to have a child that they will name either Catherine or Christopher. What happened to sticking with the D names? Damien would have been a great choice if they had a little boy. Bart invites his family to the Foxworth Chapel for a mysterious little ceremony. A home chapel? How shockingly indulgent of him. It all goes swimmingly until he nearly drowns baby Deirdre in the baptismal font while having a flashback of attempting to drown Cindy and If There Be Thorns. I don't remember this scene being in the book, but anyway, Jory snaps and threatens to kill his brother if he even so much as breathes on the twins again. Sounds like Jory has a little bit of anger control issues there. It's not like the kid actually died. They managed to save her just in time. Kathy tucks little Barty into bed and feeds him some pills. Careful there, Bart. The mother did the same thing to her daughter in The Bad Seed, and Kathy's family has a history of slipping stuff to their kids without their knowledge. Bart drifts off as Kathy soothes him and reassures him that she loves him. Jory and Chris think it's time to get the heck out of Dodge. Kathy is hesitant, but she ultimately agrees. She is packing up her suitcase when Bart walks in on her and realizes his mother is abandoning him. In the book, Bart cries over this and shows what a big softy he is, but in the movie, we have to have a scene where Bart basically essays his mother by ordering her to take off her shirt as he threatens her with the world's tiniest sword. He tells her he's going to cleanse his family of their sins now. And Jory, who must have realized what was up after finding a defaced portrait of the family in the baby's room, rushes in on his white wheelchair stallion and saves the day. He tries to choke his brother into unconsciousness, but apparently all that Rocky training hasn't made him capable of rendering Bart Foxworth unconscious. Bart sobs that Malcolm made him do it. Right, Bart. Should I call a psychiatrist or an exorcist? By the way, a little earlier we saw Chris stop to help a woman who was pulled over with car troubles. As it turns out, that was not just a useless non sequitur. While helping the pretty lady out of the kindness of his heart, he's hit by an oncoming vehicle. Kathy finds this out when a car arrives at Foxworth Hall, and it's not her tardy husband, but rather a cop. I'm getting serious déjà vu. The same thing happened with Daddy on his 36th birthday, remember? Wow, 36 is so freaking young. Did he still wear diapers and suck a baby bottle? Chris is in his 50s at this point, so it's not as senseless when he dies, I guess. Back in the 90s, he probably only had a couple of good years left anyway. With Y2K fast approaching, they probably all had only minutes left to live. Now Cindy is arriving home in a limo and runs sobbing into Bart's waiting arms. Their daddy is dead, so of course they must comfort each other with a passionate kiss. It's only right and proper. Bart gives a touching graveside eulogy about how he made his parents' life a living nightmare, and he's really sorry about that. He's done being cold and aloof and driving his family members to an early death. How reassuring. Looks like there's hope for him after all. Jory becomes a ballet instructor, and Bart becomes a televangelist, traveling the world alongside his sanctimonious wife Cindy as they preach to others about God's great love. Praise the Lord! Their souls have been saved. They can now marry their siblings with a guilt-free conscience. Kathy could have gone off to be with her kids, but decides that, nah, I'd like to remain in this abandoned mansion all by myself and wander up to the lonely attic of my childhood torment, where I can die of a broken heart in peace while I hallucinate flowers all around me. She feels like a ghost without her brother lover. In the book, the hired help finds her dead up there, surrounded by paper flowers and holding a final letter for her family. She's gone to be with Chris now. I have to say, the ending of the book absolutely gutted me. It's just so heartbreaking to think that this poor woman suffered so much in her lifetime that her world became like a prison, and heaven became her escape. Anyway, I give the movie 2 out of 5 stars. I admit it was a guilty pleasure, but it's just too much. It's too much of a soap opera, and there's no way Bart and Cindy would ever get together like that. They didn't in the book. That was something Lifetime had to add in order to put the great V.C. Andrews to shame, and I guess, paradoxically, make her proud. And once again, I weep for the loss of the evil Joel, who I do not really think was Joel Foxworth, rather an imposter, but he made a good villain anyway. So that's all for the Dollenganger saga, at least for now. I will be back eventually with the Origin miniseries, and I do hope to review the other series as well, such as the Castiles, the Landrys, and the Cutlers, and let's not forget My Sweet Audrina. Please let me know what you thought of these first 4 movies in the comments. Thanks for watching!